Iberstiftong Philippines is part of this mini-series I was hoping to make sabay-sabay pero hindi ko sila masabay with a couple of progressive intellectuals and experts about post-mortem about elections and what is next for the Philippines. Kaya kasama lang natin today, wala lang yan, just another guy, just another guest, Dr. Lisandro Claudio. Thank you very much, Leloy, for joining us.
Magandang umaga, Richard.
Kaya nga sinabi ko yung partner natin.
Diretso na yun.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Magandang umaga at marami pa. Dindelay ko lang yung usapan kasi uso sa atin ngayon ang pagde-delay, ang pagde-dribble.
Right. Dribble. Let's talk about dribble before we talk about ano tawag dyan? Yung sa eyebrows.
Kung di nyo alam kung sino yung ginagaya ko. Baka
No.
pero sa tingin ko alam nyo naman kung sino.
Yeah, I think I think. By the way, good morning, bro. Good morning. Good morning. Speaking of good morning, you want to start with postmortem before we go to your favorite senador, fashionista slash I don't know, connoisseur.
Basketball-
Exactly,
basketball player.
dribble man,
Basketball
the
player.
dribble man. Bago natin pag-usapan si dribble man, dito muna tayo kay Ben Tulfo. Like, bro, what happened? Sumabla yung mga Tulfos, bro. What is your read? Sumobra na yung Tulfo hype natin.
Pero bro, matagal ko na sinasabi to, di ba? Kasi among elite circles,
Right.
lagi nila sinasabi si Tulfo. Di ba? Kasi hindi nila actually alam kung sino yung Tulfo. In fact, when you talk to a boomer, when they refer to Tulfo, they're thinking Mon Tulfo. Kasi yung
right.
Tulfo na naaalala na nung uso pa yung gossip column, kasi si Mon, not really gossip, but like semi-gossip, semi-political column.
Correct.
What people don't realize nga is iba-iba ang mga Tulfo, and yung masa can distinguish among Tulfos. So, linawin lang natin, yung kuya, Simon, wala na yan, laos na yun, Simon. Even boomers think na Simon pa rin ang Tulfo. And then yung T3, sila yung sumikat through TV5.
Correct.
Si Rafi, si Erwin, at saka si Ben.
Right.
But all of them had their own TV5 shows.
Right.
So si Ben, si Bitag, and then I think Erwin was mostly a newscaster sa TV5.
Right.
And then si Rafi, of course, had not just a TV5 show, but yung Radyo 5 show, which before actually was on government TV, kaso natanggal siya kasi nagpag-away siya kay Mike Arroyo, yung Wanted sa radyo.
Yeah.
And among those shows, yung Wanted sa radyo, yun talaga yung pinaka-importante. At yun talaga yung tumatak. So, Bitag was always like a bit of a sideshow compared to all those shows. So ako, I'm not gonna say na I expected this to happen. I expected Ben to still win.
Yeah.
So hindi naman sinasabi kong tama ko all the way. Pero if we were to provide a kind of retrospective analysis kung bakit malakas yung dalawang Tulfo and mahina yung isang Tulfo, I think it's just reflective of the fact na mas mababa talaga yung following ni Ben compared to Erwin, and definitely compared to the main man, yung idol talaga si Rafi Tulfo.
The hype is not gonna go away. Like, Ben not making it kasi what's her name? Amy Marcos was able to make it by the teeth of her skin, easing out Ben. So medyo masaklap kay Ben kasi number 13 siya, and he was seen as relatively safe in almost a lot of pre-election surveys. So my genuine apologies dun sa mga staff niya and people niya if after watching our shows and episodes nagkaroon sila ng perhaps undue confidence. But to be clear also about this, independent din kasi si Ben. So walang makinarya na sumuporta sa kanya. Right? But nevertheless, Erwin, top 5, but not number 1, not number 2, not even number 3, right? Number 4, not very impressive, and just over someone that many thought would not even make it. And I'm talking about, of course, Kiko Pangilinan. So we'll talk more about that side of the equation, the surprise or pleasant surprise nung 2025 elections. But I just felt it's important na pag-usapan natin si Ben Tulfo and Rafi Tulfo. And you're right, actually sa generation natin, verb na ang Tulfo, ipatulfo na kita, di ba?
Ipatulfo.
Hindi na, wala nang differentiation, it's just a verb. Gusto mo itulfo kita.
Pero naalala ko dati, pero yung meron talaga and I think it's a bit of an elite phenomenon not to be able to distinguish Tulfo. Naalala ko sorry na lang Ronald si Ronald, pinagsabihan niya ni Mark Gamboa dati. Kasi si Ronald, nung tinanong siya, bakit daw influential si Rafi Tulfo? Dahil daw sa isumbong mo kay Tulfo phenomenon.
Right.
Tama naman yung sabi ni Mark Gamboa, which Ronald, Si Erwin, si ano yun, si Montulfo yun.
Oh,
Ang panahon na pupong pa yung isumbong mo kay Tulfo. Wanted sa radyo yung kay Rafi, di ba? So kahit ang kahit the Venerable Ronald Llamas na napaka-plugged in sa political scene, ay nahirapan pa rin mag-distinguish among the
Yeah.
Tulfos.
Yan ang problema kay Sir Ronald kasi napaka-confident niya. Wala siyang caveats all the time. We had to redo a whole episode kasi 100% confident. Hindi uwi si Digong from Hong Kong. I said, how can you say that? It's his whole brand to be like be defiant and ayun tuloy, umuwi. Sabi ko,
Ano na yung part na yan ng Ronald Llamas
I know.
brand.
Yeah, it comes with the talagang
It
ang
comes
tunay
with
na
the
lalaki ang hindi magka-caveat. As in, yun na yun. Yun na yun. Parang so tuloy. Obviously, you want to talk about the more, the long-term prospects, etc., for the progressive movement. Pero yung initial scanning mo as a historian, 1992 and 2007 were the last time we saw something like this, right? Na sobrang nag-underperform yung administration. What is your read of, yun nga, I don't even know how to count, 5 or 6, like Camille Villar. Ano bang position ni Camille Villar? It's like, depende ba yan sa gusto ng, like, what is your read of this in terms of historical parallels, if any?
Ay, actually medyo nagulat din ako, Richard, kasi from Noynoy onwards, 'di ba? Naging uso na term yung term na signaling power of the president.
Right.
I know Ronnie Holmes really used this term, and it seemed as if from Noynoy to Duterte napakalakas ng signaling power na 'yon.
Right.
Especially since people thought anomalous si GMA kasi sobrang corrupt ng perception sa kanya, 'di ba? Also, babae siya.
Misogyny.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oo,
Yeah.
may misogyny. So akala nila exceptional yung mga midterm fails ni GMA, and from now on we would move on to a kind of powerful president with huge signaling power. And apparently hindi pala nangyari. And yung mga postmortem dito na narinig ko is I was talking to a friend, he said meron lang tayong bahagi ng electorate which as whatever, now millennials, na hindi na tayo sobrang bata, na hindi na talaga natin naiintindihan. And that is whatever, like TikTok or various other forms of social media na hindi na natin nakikita. That's really opaque to us. And we are going to be unearthing various levels of opacity as we move on. And that's all I can say in terms of like in all humility, kasi I mean I didn't see it coming either, and I just assumed that the president had huge signaling power, and so we may be moving in another direction. Although, the other thing is maybe in 6 years we go like, ito yung anomalous election, bumalik na yung signaling power ng presidente. It is also possible that it has something to do with this president na ang hina ng kanyang retorika na may pagka-wishy-washy siya, right? One wonders, ano kaya nangyari if he had just gone like super strong and said like anti-Duterte tayo, anti-EJK, and then throughout the entire campaign yung nakapronta yung mga biktima ng EJK. One wonders, like...
Well, he tried, right? The Lawag one, when he commenced the campaign, he went on the offensive. I think that was a very good speech. He had also that moment last year when he responded very strongly to Sara Duterte's direct threat, not only to him, but his family and his cousin. May mga siya, pero in the end, parang flash in the pan yung nangyari and walang follow-through, or at least walang follow-through yung kanyang mga candidates. But I would say the president was also undermined by really having a problematic composition. I mean, look at the quality and the ideological vacuity, if I can put it, of yung mga alyansa members. Kasi tingnan mo, when BBM went on the offensive doon sa Lawag switch na in February, sabi niya, wala kaming supporters ng EJK. Tapos biglang, wait, di ba itong senator na ito yung sinabi na paano ni Digong? Di ba itong senator na, wala kaming tuta ng China, ganyan, West Philippines. Wait, di ba itong mga senator walang sinabi? Do you get what I'm saying? There was really always a credibility gap, not only with BBM himself, because he was part of Uniteam, but practically his entire team were very problematic figures, with few exceptions here and there. At least Lacson could say he was tough on West Philippine Sea and China, right? Mga ganun. Pero mahina. The only guy who attended consistently yung sorties ni BBM, kasi iniwasan pa nga siya ng ibang candidates kasi unpopular daw, lalo kung Mindanao or certain regions na malakas yung Duterte support, parang iniwasan pa nga siya ng mga senators. The only one who attended all of his sorties regularly, at least compared to the others, was Pacquiao, who was like, I think underperformance is an understatement. We're
Grabe,
surprised
no?
also, bro, how many big celebrities lost in this race. Willie Revilla may got even fewer votes than, although that's a reflection of strength of Heidi Mendoza, someone we have to talk about more. What's his name? I almost said Buduts, pero baka makasuhan na tayo. Si Bong Revilla did not make it far, far from the Magic 12. Pacquiao was way out of the Magic 12 circle. I mean, were you also surprised by how badly some of these big celebrities perform, not only in defiance of service, but also in defiance of history or patterns?
Yeah, and I know people hate this yung ano, parang you use your conversation with a taxi driver as an indicator for
Yeah.
changes. Pero it's very interesting now as a kind of overseas Filipino. Uuwi ako. So the first conversation I have about the country is really with my taxi driver kasi babagsak akong airport. O ako ng, by the way, okay pa rin ang coupon taxis ng airport ngayon. Good value for money pa rin. So I line up sa coupon taxi, hindi ako nagpapadenggoy doon sa mga tao na ino-oversell yung prices ng kanilang taxi. Diretso ko doon. Tapos, so the first conversation I have is with the taxi driver. Tapos sabi niya, Sir, anong tingin niyo sa... Proud pa siya, he was the one who broached the topic. Sir, anong tingin niyo sa election? Ang galing ng Pilipino, no? Ayaw na natin ng mga bobo. Ayaw na natin ng mga hindi maalam. Mga artista lang. Sabi ko, kuya, parang sold ako dyan. Kasi sir, ang tagal na tayong niloloko eh. So, I think just based on that, N minus, N equals 1, di ba? Just based on that one conversation, siguro masasabi ko, nagsawa na yung mga tao talaga sa mga artista. And lahat ng mga may tanning, I guess. Kasi, like running as an artista without doing the work, that's a bit of a long con. And kung long con yan, may tanning yan. Having said that, meron namang mga artista na nag-aaral and hopefully sila, hindi ko naman sinasabing walang role ang artista sa politika, pero dapat naman once they get there, they start catching up, right? And kaya nga medyo masama loob ko kay Pacquiao kasi si Pacquiao naman actually tried, di ba? I mean, he tried. I actually feel bad that I'm one of those people na baka dapat binoto ko na lang si Pacquiao. Actually, hindi ko siya binoto. Pero ikaw, what do you think? Pinagsisihan mo ba na...
No, actually, I completely agree. I think Pacquiao was one of those. He's not just any artista, man. He's a global icon, right? I mean, I completely disagree with the homophobic statements he made. His years supporting Digong. I'm absolutely critical. His absentee record. Ang basa ko kasi kay Pacquiao is sometimes it's actually quite over. He's too sincere for his own good, and at the same time, like for instance, siya lang nag-attend sa mga sorties ni BBM, loyal soldier siya. And then siguro naging kampante lang siya precisely because he got that last minute endorsement from Lenny. But I think that endorsement came a little bit too late and it was, I won't say haphazard, pero parang hindi nag-all-in si Lenny. Kasi parang sinabi lang ni Lenny, mabait siya sa akin, friends kami, ganun. But siguro ang dapat ginawa niya, at I think this is where he made his situation worse nung nag-release siya nung video na very defensive. Sabi nila, bobo ako, pero ako nakapag-aral ng mga tao. Sabi nila, bobo ako, pero marami akong tinulungan. That doesn't come off nice, no? Actually, parang nag-Willie Revilla may effect siya eh. Yung parang defensive ka. Bakit? Ikaw, ano gusto mong batas? Di ba? Kung baga na Cynthia Villar sila. I mean, Cynthia Villar is, right? Parang the ultimate Karen who lost in this election. And every time na Karen, si Willie Revilla, may bumababa yung ratings niya. And feeling ko Karen yung labas ni Pacquiao and hindi sufficient and timely yung endorsement kay Lenny. I think Lenny could have said, nag-usap kami ni Manny, pangako ni Manny na sisiguraduhin niya na ganito, yung accountability issues, ganito, ganyan. And then Manny should have released a video. Alam ko, dati busy ako, marami kong boxing, ganyan, ganyan. Pero, sisipagin ko na yan this time, ganyan, ganyan. Kasi, babawi ako or something like that. Diba? Parang boxing yan. I didn't do as well before, but I can do better. Maniwala kayo. Marang sablay ang nangyari. So, you could say there's some element of parang confluence of factors, diba?
Actually,
or perfect
believable
storm.
yung bawi narrative kay Pacquiao because that's who he was as a boxer,
Like,
diba?
exactly.
Sometimes he wouldn't get it. Like it would take him some time to figure out an opponent. Like Morales, it took him some time to figure out Morales. But once he figured out Morales, he freaking figured Morales out. So I think baka benta yun actually. And then, di ba, tama ba, meron talagang record si Pacquiao of working with Lenny ever since, di ba? Like they were already having conversations about yung president, about running for president before, di ba? Na parang may possible tandem in the making at one point na nag-fall through lang yung discussions. Am I right? May ganun, di ba?
Yeah, although parang sinisi nila si Isko. Parang si Isko yung lumabas na parang sa narrative nila is si Isko yung Karen. And it's interesting. Isko is still responding to that moment na sinasabi. Hindi ko inaway si Lenny, ah. So you could see until now, emotions are still raw. And I don't want to pick a fight or pick a side here. All I'm saying is that kitang-kita natin chemistry nilang dalawa nung election time, even if they were rivals. They were singing to the same tune. Pacquiao was very clear na
Right.
against EJK na siya. He's for West Philippine Sea, etc. So,
Right.
kumbaga, tama ka, yung arc of redemption niya is quite compelling sana. And yung comeback story, everyone loves the comeback story in sports, right? So, ganun din sana sa politika. So, I think it was really a perfect storm of many things going wrong for Pacquiao in the most competitive race, no? Out there. So, I think, and siguro nag-expect din sila na the machinery of the state will carry them.
Yeah.
And somehow, okay, I want to ask you this. What is your read on the idea that probably kasalanan din ng surveys yan? That, the surveys made some too complacent and made some actually struggle more than they should have, right? We heard like Chel Jock na saying, kung sana sa surveys lang, mas klaro, edi mas madali kumuha ng funding. You could have easily said, alam mo, kung ako si Chel, tinignan ko yung final result. Kung ako rin si Heidi, I would said, actually, may chance ako to be senator, right? Like, what is your read of that? I know both of us are in this team, parang wag tayo mag-Google Trends, survey muna tayo kasi yun pa rin yung, parang Churchillian kasi ako eh, like this is the worst way of measuring but it's better than every other alternative. But some would say this election cycle, medyo the statistical parang digression was a little bit more than in the past. But our good friend si Ronnie Holmes, I think, has his own understanding of this. Parang sabi niya yung surveys na closer to the elections, much closer captured this. I don't know. I mean, what is your read on that? Because surveys now are once again under scrutiny in ways they have not been for a while.
So I'll tell you the most hirap ako dito, di ba? Because one, hindi ako good enough sa regression analysis to figure out kung ano yung tama at kung ano yung mali. I'm not a mathematician. I'm also not like good in quantitative methods. So yun yung unang pasakali. Yung pangalawang pasakali is that I have worked with Pulse Asia. So I really do think it's an honest organization. So I'll tell you the most persuasive anti-survey argument I've heard from a former political operator. And then I'll tell you the most persuasive pro-survey argument I've heard. And then I'll punt on whether or not I agree with one or the other. The first, yung pinaka is yung survey, it limits the people who can get funding. Kasi
Exactly.
kung mababa ka sa survey, hindi ka makakuha ng funding. So it tends to reproduce the candidates who are already powerful.
Self-reinforcing dynamic, yeah.
Oo. So kunwari, number 17 ka, lumapit ka sa funder, and yung funder gusto magtaya sa panalo, hindi magbibigay sa'yo, right? And that's how Philippine business operates. And that's particularly sad because that prevents people from new candidates from emerging. On the other hand, parang this idea of not having surveys, how would you do it? Like that would require a kind of ban, right? Kind of survey ban, because kunwari, Pulse Asia says ayaw hindi na lang kami magre-release ng political survey because ayaw namin ng bandwagon effect, assuming totoo nga yung bandwagon effect. What if somebody else just releases their political survey? Di parang sira na yung ginawa ng Pulse Asia. So you can't do it as an individual survey company. It would require a ban, and then a ban would probably be problematic because what is a survey? It's essentially political speech, right? So may freedom of speech issues tayo kung ibaban mo yung survey. I don't know if you agree with me there, Richard.
To
get out of that problem.
I think it's medyo, I think that's medyo advanced ang mag-isip kung ganyan ng level ng thinking. No, I'm all for surveys coming out. I'm just saying that first there has to be humility on the part of social scientists and even people who are conducting surveys to see that, first of all, it's not only a snapshot, but maybe the structural conditions for survey have changed. I mean, you're based in the US, you teach in Berkeley. I'm sure you have come across numerous reports, including by New York Times, among others, saying that nahihirapan na sila mag-survey nowadays in the US because trust in all sorts of institutions is lower than ever, right?
Yeah. May isang thesis dito na doesn't have to do with trust in institutions. It's about the growth of C. And narinig mo na ata to na one of the reasons daw why the surveys didn't really fully get the result towards the end is because yung survey categories is premised on Class C being relatively small, but also Class C being available to field workers. May interview nila
Right.
yung klase. But there are two related phenomena that make that more difficult now. Number one, yung expansion ng klase lumaki. So, hindi kailangan mong baguhin yung weights because nga, yung mayaman yung Pilipinas.
True.
We're so rich. We're so freaking rich now. Like, people are gonna deny this, but the Philippines is really rich. So, lumalaki yung klase. Pangalawa, class C is starting to behave like class B and A, meaning they're calling themselves up in private condominiums and subdivisions. So kung yung class A may Forbes Park, yung class C may Camellia Homes, the effect is the same. Hindi mo sila ma-interview.
Cynthia
So,
Holmes. Cynthia Holmes.
so the theory goes na kaya hindi makuha ng survey yung talagang sentimento ng electorate is because ang hirap mo na makuha yung class C. I think the survey companies are going to have to test that hypothesis out, but it's a great hypothesis. I think that, I think survey companies are actually willing to test out the money. It's not as if they're not reflecting on that reality. In
Well,
fact, that
it's an
hypothesis,
industry, right? So they have
yeah.
to regain some lost ground, whether it's fair or not. Ako parati, I'm somewhere in the middle. Parang point ko is, um, totally disagree ako yung mga nagsasabi na walang kwenta ng mga surveys. Shoutout kay Sir Ronald. But at the same time, I think survey, folks should also be a little bit more humble about this. I sense a bit too much of defensiveness. And then at the same time, I think some explanations have to be made. Like, for instance, I'll be honest, it's not only me, but even other people in the surveying world kind of raise their eyebrows when say like, why are we surveying Duterte's trust rating in the same column as someone is actually serving as a
Oh, that's
president?
interesting.
You get what I'm saying? Like parang apples and oranges to put it nicely. And then of
Yeah.
course, I'm sure some people were not happy when I said, ay, isama niyo lang si Kibole Ateves. I mean, if you're gonna put people in detention or criminals there and just make it look like or it could come off like a popularity
Are you
contest.
saying it's like normalization?
My point is you're making politics like stock markets. You're making it a popularity context because, again, this is why I say that to myself. Richard, you should be also careful with what you say. I mean, kaya nga I'm not going to use Human Development Index for quite some time is because it's so easy for what you say to be taken out of context and weaponized in a highly hyper polarized environment. And that's
Yeah.
I saw that very tragically or at least in a, in very difficult way in my own personal case. Like I want to raise something legitimate and then it can get twisted. Next thing you know, it creates its own world. Even more so if you're leading a survey agency or one of the leading survey agencies that next thing you know, all I see online is, ayun pala 60% approval ni Duterte, ibalik na sa Pilipinas. Or si Sara pala, majority pala si BBM pala, lame duck na, di ba? Yung ganon na these narratives, I'm not sure how they're helping our democracy because my mentor was Pepe Miranda and I remember the very founder of Pulse Asia, whose argument back in the day was that, surveys could help policymakers to fine-tune their policy, it gives a snapshot, but now we're in a weaponization phase. So I just felt, sana I was thinking more version of the other survey which we saw from SWS, I think WR numero has it, which is asking people, do you think na kailangan na harapin ni Sara Duterte yung impeachment? I think not to say to dapat paalisin siya. Like just I think those questions are also important to be asked instead of just popularity questions. And last time I checked, ano bang trabaho ni Sara since she left DepEd? I mean, parang ang weird. Ewan ko, like I'm not sure how these surveys are becoming helpful if it's being reduced to popularity contest measurement, whether it's
Right.
affective
So
polarization, blah blah blah.
So you're also saying na dapat bumalik yung original intention ng some of the surveys, which is actually measuring public opinion related to certain policies. Right? Because in that sense it's useful, diba? Like for
Yeah.
example, most Filipinos are in favor of policy X, legislation X.
Yeah.
Then that sends a clear message to our legislators about where to go, right? And it serves a function in a democratic system because prior to surveys, ang feedback mo lang election, right? So in between elections, politicians are essentially in the shadows. Hindi nila alam kung ano yung mandato nila. They're just working off the electoral results. But with surveys, you get an idea of this, however fleeting it is, like this idea of public opinion, which can then shape legislative practice and which, in a sense, theoretically should make democracy more responsive.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's ideal. I know, kagas sasabihin nila, like, ang mahal gumawa ng surveys, etc., which also raises issues with funding. And for me, if you're gonna do surveys which are for public interest purposes, you're releasing the public for free, right? You want to make sure it's something that actually enforces questions of policy effectiveness, or to be more idealistic about it, accountability. So I think it was good that SWS and others came up with this surveys asking people, whoa, wait, bago natin tanungin gaano ka-popular or lovable si Tatay Digong or si Sara, unang-una, kailangan ba natin balikan yung Miggy Mango and mga ganon, di ba? Like, we can have a debate about whether the SWS survey was the best designed question survey. Okay, we can have a debate. But so let's have multiple versions of that. Let's see who has the better one. Yun lang, I'm just
Pero
worried.
okay na rin nga na parang hindi na yung surveys din, hindi na big two, di ba? Because Pulse and SWS lang before. Ngayon nga you have Sina Cleve, like, and then of course Sina
Okta, yeah, exactly. No, I'm good with that. But let's be honest, Pulse Asia has been the most regular, consistent, and I think, yeah, not to exaggerate this, but it's the gold standard of surveys in the country. The way my authority, I know this because I talk to campaign people. Like, parati pag nag-uusap kami ng mga different surveys, hindi, Pulse Asia pa rin tinitignan namin eh. Something like that, diba? So, you could see, it has the... Kasi ang nangyari sa established for a while, parang nawala siya sa eksena, diba? And then, well, speaking of surveys, like, there are also gaps. Like exit polls. Wala tayong exit polls since 2016. So, like...
Wala ng pera, kasi wala ng pera.
So, sana mag-consortium sila, diba? I know it's expensive kasi ang laki ng sampling. But,
Bro, hindi. Wala tayong exit poll since 2010. I remember 2016.
meron
pa lang.
2016 SWS. Meron sa
meron.
TV5, nakita ko. Yeah. Meron 2016. We saw the breakdown. So for instance, yung exit poll ng 2016 proves you na mali yung sinasabi nila, yung mga kabataan walang alam sa kasaysayan kaya binoto si BBM. Actually, it's not true. Ang mas bumoto kay BBM based on exit polls, guess what?
Ito yung vice presidential run niya.
Yeah, I mean, it's both, diba? Pero doon sa vice presidential, nakita natin na actually more voted for BBM na boomer who should have known better and even older Gen X than millennials. In fact, the millennials edged it out for Lenny Robredo. And then kay Digong, and this is where you and I come in, we have been saying this forever, ito yung tinatawag ni Walden ng reactionary middle class. The higher the education level, the higher socioeconomic bracket, the higher support for Digong, 2016. We already saw that in the exit polls, not only in pre-election surveys. But yun nga, parang 2022 and especially 2025, Gen Z na kasing lumalaking demographic eh. Tayo mga matatandang millennials, we're still in the game, but the Gen Zs are becoming more and more important. And I would say they're also the more protean or liminal demographic. Probably their voting patterns are a little bit less rigid, let's say, than other demographics, but we wouldn't know that if we don't have exit polls. So actually, purong educated guess tayo. So this is where I want surveys to happen, right? So siguro, less surveys na pwedeng gawing popularity context ng troll farms or interested parties, even though hindi yun ang intention ng surveys, and maybe more exit polls. Sana nagsama itong mga survey agencies na. It's not, I'm sure, it's not like they didn't earn much during election fear. Like, I'm sure they, I mean, come on, let's be honest. I'm sure there was money. I mean, I know it's not easy, it's expensive. Kung nagsama sila, resource. So I think it's malaking pagkakulang sa ating political analysis na wala tayong legit exit polls since 2016 basically.
Sobra for me, sobra. And that's something that Manolo Quezon also says all the time, yung exit polls. Matagal na yung sinasabi na dapat talaga yung pupondo ng exit polls. And I wonder why yung mga people who used to fund it ayaw na nilang pondohan. Parinig, alam niyo naman kung sino kayo mga nagpa-fund ng exit poll dati. Balik niyo naman. Contribution nyo na lang sa demokrasya ang Pilipino yan.
Mga pogo, baka pwede. Maraming pera mo yan, mga pogo. Dali natin si Harry.
Ito yung isa sa mga, by the way, sa mga viewers natin, just to basics ng survey. Yung mga survey company, hindi sila independently mayaman. Like, Ronnie Holmes is not a millionaire.
No, not Ron. He's an academic like us.
So, ang survey company talaga, they live and die yan based on yung subscriber ng mga politiko na nagsasubscribe at yung mga tao nagko-commission talaga ng mga survey. So, kung wala tayong mga people who are commissioning exit survey, wala talaga yan. Pulse is just not going to be able, or SWS, they're not just going to be able to do that kung wala nagko-commission.
That's a good point. Thank you so much again for mentioning that. So again, we take into consideration, some would say legitimate, some would say emotional, some would say understandable criticism of surveys. But guys, the alternative to surveys is Kwentong Barbero, Google Trends, all sorts of different stuff. So I'm just going to be Churchillian about this and say it might be problematic, but it's still better than all other alternatives, right? And it can always be improved. Now, going back to this, and by the way, I'm just talking in general. Obviously, some surveys got it closer. I think the one that Paul said shot closer to the election was okay. I had a consumer sentiment by a major company. Baka naman, pwede na kayo mag-fund din ng exit polls. Internal yan sa mga korporasyon yan. I saw it that actually said 20-25% ng voters decide on the election day. So sabi ko, ang laki pala ng elasticity nito. And meron sila internal survey na nakita ko, top 5 sila Bam and Kiko. That was like wow. Yung Mark Oleta lang wala akong nakita na. I don't think there's any survey no that
Mark Oleta.
the Mark Oleta one I would say is really like talagang parang alien invasion like what like talagang unknown nung 4 categories known unknown like I've not seen any survey even yung kay Malu na kinuha niya correctly kay Bam. I'm not sure got Mark Oleta number 6 though. Like,
Pero alam mo, na-realize ko kay Marcoleta, if you're a machine, mabilis lang kay Marcoleta, if you're a machine politician, gusto mo si Marcoleta reliable eh. Kasi panahon pa lang ni GMA, di ba? Naalala mo nung impeachment, yung ini-impeach si GMA, useful si Marcoleta. Kasi siya yung nagpa-file ng impeachment na palpak. Kasi di ba,
right.
na-file mo na yung impeachment, they've decided on it, hindi ka na pwede mag-file ulit. So kung i-file mo yung palpak na articles of impeachment, effectively the president is protected. And
Team player siya. Yeah,
Marcoleta was so reliable. Like,
right.
love siya ng Arroyo camp because he would always file the bad impeachment complaints and he would not complain. He was a team player. So if you are a machine politician, Marcoleta is such a reliable ally and he's such an efficient ally in that sense.
Well, we'll talk about another very reliable. No, I'm just kidding. Mapahamak ko naman tayo. No, you're absolutely right. Remember yung she may not? She may not. Meron na version ni Marcoleta, you may not. Diba? Yung parang, every time kinikriticize si Sarah, dinidefend niya si Sarah. So nagkaroon na you may not. So before the whole Marcoleta in West Philippines memes came out, it was the you may not. So you're right. He's actually a team player, in fairness to him. And, if you put aside ideology and normative discussions, you're absolutely right. From a political calculus point of view, you want someone like him.
A political calculus point of view, masarap ilagay sa sample ballot si Marcoleta.
Tama ka. He delivers.
Not from a
Absolutely.
and again, sana hindi tayo maklip not from a moral point of view. So don't take this out of context because I did not vote for Marcoleta and I don't think from a moral point of view justifiable na supportan si Marcoleta. I'm saying from a machine politician's point of view.
But you voted for Ben Tulfo.
I met Ben Tulfo and I was very charmed by Ben Tulfo. I met him close to your current studio sa Reliance.
Ayan. Tulfonatics na naman tayo dyan, pare. Mababash na naman tayo. Now let's go to the more progressive side of the ledger. So, Akbayan, number 1, like, ang layo sa lahat ng surveys na nakita ko. Like 600% better than the surveys I saw. And highest ever in the history of, like, party. Even Duterte youth na medyo matanda na sila. Like, paano naging youth mo? But, like, even Duterte youth, yung mga Tulfo party list, they couldn't match it, diba? Like, actually, I was so amazed by party list. Like, yung Angkas nila George just got 100,000 views. Imagine with everything Angkas has, with Vice Ganda, ganon. Ang dami natalo mga party list na you would have thought na easy for them. And then Akbayan did so good. So what do you think, bro? Is it children factor? Is it also the Gen Z factor?
Makwento ko lang, the week after the election was the wedding of my brother. And yung brother ko at saka yung now-wife niya, Akbayan. Tapos, alam naman tao, Akbayan family ako. So yung mga ninang at saka yung mga ninong puro Akbayan. Yung mga tao doon puro Akbayan. So hindi ko alam kung kung wedding siya or celebration.
Yeah.
Kasi yung mga Akbayan, sobrang high spirits. Everybody was so happy. So, partly they were celebrating my brother and my new sister-in-law. But they were also celebrating the party. And it was a great wedding for that reason, apart from the fact that, it's a great merging of two really, I think, really great families with great political consciences. But wow, like nobody expected it. And syempre petty, no? Parang as in terms of being competitive, parang ang saya, mas marami pang seats ang Akbayan as a single party kaysa sa buong Makabayan block. Di ba? Parang wow. That has never happened, di ba? Usually kinakain yung Akbayan ng Makabayan block. And also like for a party that nung panahon ni Gloria, zinizero yung akbayan, di ba? To being number one. So hindi ko alam kung ano yung read nun. Pero ang bango-bango ng akbayan, even when you just talk to people, it's become like, I mean, I always thought na people, reformists or people na may political conscience, they have a choice, right? They can go for the Liberal Party or pwede silang makabayan, right? And you're pinging back and forth between those two groups, and you feel like, oh, one's too left and then one is like too mainstream. Then akbayan may feel just right. Alam mo ba, parang I think
Goldilocks,
yung baseline for yung affect ng amor ng mga tao for akbayan, this kind of Goldilocks middle. But that's always been the case for akbayan. It's always had the Goldilocks middle. That doesn't explain why number one siya for this election. So what is it about this election that made that Goldilocks middle kind of air about akbayan? What was it about that made that Goldilocks middle thing more matingkad?
Yeah.
Yun hindi ko masagot. Baka si Chel yun, baka just disillusionment with so many parties, and I have no idea. I haven't talked to any akbayan people about a kind of post-mortem. They've just been mostly
Really? Like, they didn't even gave you a kind of off the record. Obviously, I'm sure Tamao's rules then, but didn't anyone give you like kind of a working post-mortem at least? Obviously, the easiest way is to say it was nag-align ng lahat ng stars, diba? Like Riza Ontiveros becoming really a mainstream politician, especially after her stellar, I called her the breakout star of Philippine politics last year. Grabe, she canned how many Pogo people, si Gua Huaping. Actually, the correct way is AKA Alice Go, but she's Go Hopping. I mean, the Pogo thing, grabe. Like, I think I even know like MAGA Filipinos who like Riza Ontiveros. Imagine, like, people are pro-Trump, Filipino Americans, they love Riza. So, I think Riza did a great job of making people appreciate the more social, democratic, progressive approach to this than your standard liberalism or standard far to the left kind of position. And then obviously, I mean, I think Chel Jokno's the X factor he brought into the picture is really hard to dismiss. And then Percy, the impeachment, he was the one who really sponsored. So siguro nagsama-sama lahat, no? Pero baka branding din. Baka I didn't analyze the branding enough.
I'm just looking back at yung history ng mga naging first rep ng akbayan. We've had some kind of dynamite first reps from like Eta Rosales to Walden Bello, di ba? Pero in terms of mainstream appeal, like Chel's probably higher mainstream appeal than Eta or Walden. And of course, we love Walden, we love Eta, pero iba talaga yung mainstream appeal ni Chel. Of course, Risa was the rep of akbayan for the longest time. And I think I'm happy to have been wrong here, because at one point I was worried na Senator Ontiveros had become a brand independent of akbayan.
Right.
Si Risa yan Senator Ontiveros yan. And not because Risa wanted it to be that way, but because Philippine politics just tends to think in personalistic terms. So Risa did her best to carry the akbayan brand and to brand herself as akbayan. But I was fearful that the personalistic nature of the Philippines would make it such that people would forget that she was carrying a party, she was carrying a platform that was attached to that party. And what's been most comforting to me is the fact na mukhang na-associate si Senator Ontiveros, yung huge brand na yun, yung Senator Ontiveros brand, with their party. And that's a good thing for party politics in our country. Hindi completely na individualize yung treatment kay Risa.
Yeah, the coupling hindi nangyari, no? We were all worried. We were worried. So what happened is the opposite.
Ako talaga nag-decouple na So mali ako dito.
I was worried too. I completely see where you were coming from, and a part of me saying, baka nga, let's just be happy na meron tayong progressive senator, di ba? But as things stand, thank God, di ba? I mean, as we speak, may mga nagsabi, Hontiveros, NPA, they're trying to red tag Risa, but it's not working. Like, good luck doing that.
Guys, ano ba? Yung mga akbayan operatives, tinitira ng NPA yan. Paano yung i-red tag? Ito yung pinakabastos Ito yung pinakabastos pag i-red tag niyo yung akbayan. Because akbayan communities, since their foundation, nung malakas pa yung NPA, marami kami, kasi I was very involved in akbayan noong time na yun, marami kami mga local operatives na tinitira ng NPA. Kaya ako dati, public knowledge naman to, chair ako dati ng Akbayan Youth. Alam na ng mga tao na anti-communist ako, mahilig akong bumira ng NPA. Nung chair ako ng Akbayan Youth, I had to shut up a little bit kasi every time bumira kami sa national, ang tinatamaan yung local. Hindi
Yeah.
naman ako yung titirahin ng NPA,
Yeah.
yung tao namin sa local yung titirahin. So napakalaking insulto na tawagin yung isang partido na naging biktima ng NPA na NPA. Napakasakit yun.
Well, just to be clear, this is coming from hypocrites called DDS, whose tatay, oh, by the way, is gonna most likely rot somewhere far away, but was very chums with the NPA. And in fact, even appointed a couple of our good friends or fellow travelers to top positions. So I'm just telling you, this is a DDS thing, but it looks like hindi na nag-resonate to beyond the DDS realm. But going back to this, is this enough success? Obviously, 3 seats Akbayan, that's great, but that's like 3 seats in an ocean of 300 seats, right? BAM number 2, Kiko, great. Kiko number 5, but that's like 2 out of 24 republics in the Senate, right? So the numbers are not as overwhelming. Kasi so when Walden wrote third force na sila, I would say that's the aspiration. For now, at least, they could be kingmakers, right? At the very least, diba? They could be the crucial swing votes, or at least could be part of the major ongoing efforts. At saktong-sakto, nung sabi ko dapat kasama sa prosecution team si Chel, and I mean my pitch was you want Akbayan and Mamayan Liberal to be there because you want Chel Jokno and Leila De Lima to be in the prosecution team, and that's exactly what happened. As it turned out, dalawang natalo dun sa original prosecution team to, I don't know, stars aligned once again. But nevertheless, they don't have the raw numbers on their own, but they could have an outsized role, no? So they could be at least kingmakers, or do some tactical alliances and voting here and there, but eventually they have to become a third force. I think that's more of an aspiration that is not unrealistic. What is your read on that?
We'll see yung laro, 'di ba? Kasi ano yung magiging relationship niya sa admin. And I know there are some people na lantaran sinasabi na dapat may strategic and tactical alliance with the Marcos administration ngayon, itong mga nakapasok. Is that still the line of Senator Sonny Trillanes? I think Tony Lavinia was of this position. I heard him on a podcast saying this. Is this Sonny Trillanes' position at this point?
Well, for transparency, I think I may have contributed to popularizing the term tactical voting, and I got that from Alexei Navalny, right? Because Alexei Navalny came up with that strategy. So he will team up with communists and whoever is number 2 in every para lang matalo yung party ni Putin, the United Russia. So that's where I got the idea. Now, when you're in an impossible situation and you have few chips to play, these are some of the reasonable strategies you can adopt. Now, next thing I know is that, like there are different permutations of this. Ako, in principle, just to be again transparent about this, and anyways, I'm out on these issues. I think there should be some tactical, like the fact that Chel and Leila are part of a prosecution team which is mostly formed under the auspices of Martin Romualdez. I think that's already a form of tactical alliance, right? Because otherwise you could have said, "Oh no, we don't want to be part of anything that has but they didn't do that, diba? Parang okay, we may have disagreements on this issue, like Leila and Chel are still minority bloc, right? At ayaw rin nila sumama sa mga kabayan and others, right? But at the same time, on this issue of prosecution, on the issue of accountability, pwede tayo magsama dito on a very tactical issue-based way. That for me is tactical alliances. Not this full-fledged na, hindi, magbulag-bulagan na tayo sa lahat ng mga kalokohan na nangyari, o ganun, tapos mag-anti-Duterte lang tayo through and through. Yan, hindi. And then, just a second layer to this, bro, and I know this will be more relevant in different discussion, is I also did not find enough judiciousness when yung mga ibang kaibigan natin na basically the school of corruption explains everything. Basically, yung ginawa nila earlier this year was, this is the worst budget ever, the most corrupt budget ever. Yung ganun. Dude, that just made... that gave Sara a second wind like nothing else. Like basically argument ng DDS is, kami na-accuse nyo, million lang, billion lang man ang ninanakaw ng kabila. Tingnan, pakinggan nyo itong mga dilawan na to. Doon sabi ko, patay tayo dyan, gagamitin ng mga DDS yan.
I like that point. Yeah, I like that
That
point.
was, I'm sorry, that's where Sonny came out. We were discussing this and Sonny said, ang dapat focus ngayon is yung momentum kay Sara, anong pinaggagawa ng mga taong yan. So I think that's where it started becoming a thing, a discussion point. Just to be clear.
Yeah, kasi nga, di ba, medyo prime tayo sa opposition to think that corruption is the end-all, be-all issue. And medyo 6 na taon na natin sinasabi ito, hindi na yan ang primary consideration ng electorate ngayon. dapat given na anti-corruption ka eh. Given na dapat yun. So for example, yung walang korap, walang mahirap, hindi naman totoo yun eh. Pwedeng walang korap, maraming mahirap dahil yung presidente hindi makamasa. So malinis nga siya, pero hindi siya makamasa. Sa gobyernong tapat, angat buhay lahat. Hindi, you can have an honest government na hindi makamasa. Hindi angat buhay ang lahat. So dapat given na yung anti-corruption. But we're
Kasi mali yung polisiya niya. Kasi mali, new liberal, pro-market, pro-corporation. Yeah.
We're so
Malinis
primed
pero
to
sablay. Yeah.
We're so primed to respond to corruption issues na nakakalimutan natin that corruption is not the end-all be-all issue. The end-all be-all issue here is, I think, relative to the Dutertes, the survival of the very soul of our republic. Hindi yun corruption issue. Yung soul of republic is like a republic that values human life.
Yeah.
Ganun ka-basic. A republic that values its sovereignty relative to a power like China. These are not corruption issues. These are more fundamental than that. These are existential issues.
100%,
And to me, as that should be front and center. Yung two existential issues yun. Yung paniniwala natin sa dangal ng buhay ng bawat tao at yung paniniwala natin sa soberanya natin bilang isang independent country. That's not corruption. That's existential.
Well, yeah, I mean, corruption is bad, but extrajudicial killing is next level bad.
Worse,
right?
yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Selling out, you can sell out your country for your pockets or you can sell them out to a foreign power. I mean, di ba, parang iba ng level
Yeah. Treason na yan. Yeah. I mean, for corruption, you go to jail. For treason, you get, you get sent to another dimension in some countries, right? There's a reason, right?
Let's get it straight na we need to be able to discriminate sins, right? Meron siyang deal with DPWH, for example, dahil parang may pinagawang daan at kumikbak dito. That's pretty bad, but that's not as bad as selling out your country to China.
Right. Selling out basically the whole the whole shtick. No, exactly. So against corruption, given na yan, di ba? But ako kasi, maybe it's too Italian, but this is Dante Alighieri. There's a purgatory, there's 7 circle of hell, right? Discernment lang yan, di ba? All of it is bad, but there are levels to bad eh. And if you cannot do discernment,
Tama.
you shouldn't be in the business. This is, mag-ano ka na lang, di ba? I might say something, but you get what I'm saying? You have no business in politics if you don't have discernment, right? Unless you're doing this for self-promotion. Para lang, ibang usapan yan. I don't want to go into that. But, going back to this, bro. So, as we speak, people are saying, baka kailangan na ng people power. Kasi grabe na, hindi lang dribble to eh. Sabi nga ni Risa nung isang araw, buti pa yan sa basketball. After a while, may timer eh, may buzzer. Kailangan mo na i-shoot yung bola eh.
Ako na ba ang paksa ng team usapan ngayon?
Good morning, live na po. Kasama po natin ngayon ang...
Kilay ko na ba ang pag-usapan natin ngayon? Magarating na tayo.
Kilay, the most beautiful kilay in the country of 7,000 islands, millions and millions of fans. So what is your...
Pinaglalaban ko ang karapatan ng mga mahilig mag-basketball, ng mga ahit ang kilay, mga ipit ang boses.
I mean, in fairness naman, medyo, tumaas yung kilay. Hindi yung boses,
tumaas yung kilay, yung boses, hindi ba? Kasi itinaas yung kilay sa level ng boses.
Correct. Speaking of taas kilay, maraming nagtaas kilay. Sinasabi na iba, kailangan na mag-people power na. Ako ang read ko dito is, obviously, again, this goes back to my worry with, surveys just reinforcing this idea na wala na, Duterte comeback na to, malakas talaga sila, this is it. Wag na natin silang kasi parang you don't want to make enemy of the future, right? That's a nice way of putting it. So, the only way to counter that sensibility or zeitgeist is to show actually, last time I checked here in Metro Manila, marami mga pink loyalists. If you look at the vote of Alianza and Pink and Progressive Akbayan, ang laki dito sa Metro Manila and Luzon. Again, I don't want to go down that road. But what I'm saying is, maybe you want to remind also the senators na hindi lang popularity ng other side yung dapat titignan mo. Dapat titignan mo rin yung constitutional duty mo. And if you cannot look at that, then look at people who are going to be pissed off at you and may cost you your political future, right? But at the same time, we have this whole history of nakailang people power na. We don't even know. People power 4, people power 5. Because sabi ng iba, yung EDSA 4 was like January 6 natin. Some would make parallels like that. But I think that's a little bit elitist because it's the other side of the equation. This is the era massa supporters. Anyways, I'm asking you, bro, because you had a whole book on the EDSA People Power Legacy. Do you think we're past the point na wala na yan? It's done. You have to reinvent something new, or maybe there could be some versions of that for the 21st century na hindi destabilizing, hindi chaotic, hindi anti-constitutional, pero pro-constitutional people power. Because ang pinag-usapan natin dito is the constitutional duty of the Senate to act upon yung forthwith, yung impeachment that landed on their desk, what, 5 months ago, for heaven's sake.
So, di na ako naniniwala doon sa people power that leads to the removal of a president just because people massed up on the street.
Exactly.
Naniniwala ako sa popular protest pa rin going out in the streets as a means of do. And I think, ito yung working theory ko ngayon, bodies on the street still matter to politicians because it's a good gauge of yung intensity of yung support for something. Because social media support is so easy, fleeting, di ba? Magputak-putak ka sa social media, okay lang, it affects people. Pero yung brave the heat, linabas mo yung Jisoo Life fan mo, tapos pumunta ka doon, nagmarcha-marcha ka, it says that there's a kind of intensity to the cause. So I think that's still. And I have no problem against it, 'di ba? Lahat naman ng presidente tinatamaan. Like kahit si Noynoy, 'di ba? Tinamaan ng million people march, 'di ba? Hindi lang naman mga dilawan, hindi lang naman mga kalaban ng dilawan yung tinatamaan ng people power. Kahit yung mga dilawan mismo tinatamaan ng various forms of people power. So million people march was, I think, a huge, it damaged the Noynoy administration significantly, and that was part and parcel of yung pag-decline ng popularity ng Aquino administration towards the end. So there's still room for it, pero we draw the line on yung extra constitutionality.
Yun nga, like I think people also are like, we have to be clear when you say people power, it's just demonstrating na may mga citizens, proactive citizens there who are not gonna just allow these institutions to just do their own thing in clear defiance of our their duties, and also yung kasi ganito, bro, like talagang banana republic ka, no? If after all the exposés, after all the threats to the president, after all the migimangos and all the piatos and all of that, and then parang trial lang, ayaw niya. Actually, sabi ko, baka dapat sisisin na, kasi there was this episode I had with Justice Carpio where basically our argument was, yeah, she may have the numbers to block a conviction, pero kung marami ma-expose, like the money trail and everything, she will be damaged politically enough not to be able to make the run for 2028. And then next thing you know, baka Bongo will make the move. Yeah. So, bigla ngayon, baka ayaw na nilang trial kasi alam nila, even if they may have, the reason I say may is because, public opinion may force the hands of some of the senators there, right? Except, I don't know, Bato, Bongo, those people. Baka naman, parang takot sila even to have a trial from what it...
An impeachment trial remains a national event.
Yeah.
I don't know, yung Corona trial not so much, but I don't know if people remember yung trial ni Erap, di ba? People stopped watching their telenovelas to watch the impeachment trial, and impeachment trial well run with the appropriate levels of drama, yung may mga character ba? Like, if you have a great prosecution team, kung may dramatic speech si Laila de Lima, di ba? May dramatic speech si Chel Joc, no? This is the kind of event that can get people glued to their television screens. And in fact, baka mas importante pa ngayon kasi, di ba, sa States sinasabi nila, wala na yung water cooler events. Yung water cooler media events, yung everybody watches it like Friends before, and they hang out in the water cooler and talk about, wala na yun. Nangyayari rin yun sa Pilipinas. Pero suspecha ko, an impeachment trial.
Yung Quadcom. No, Quadcom had that effect. Quadcom had that effect. I mean, why go 2001? Just go 2024. Ang taas ng viewership ng Quadcom, naging household name. Yung mga congressman. Like, did you ever think we will bother to even know about whatever congressman? Like, but now suddenly, ang galing ni Ganing, ang galing ni Luistro, ang galing ni Zia, ang galing ni Gutierrez. Because they had hours and hours on TV and online to demonstrate their capacity, their skills, their patriotism, whatever you want to call it. So I think the Quadcom gave us an idea that this could be another blockbuster at even a higher level, because you're talking about
Oh,
Congress yung prosecution, defense team, senators. Imagine Robin Hood Padilla in the robe of a
yung
judge. I mean,
pageantry, bro,
I
tama.
know,
As I was about to
imagine
say,
pare, yeah.
ibang klaseng pageantry. And we run an impeachment trial better than the Americans
Oh
run
yeah.
an impeachment trial. Kasi yung impeachment trial ng Amerikano, wala namang pageantry. Merong floor sa Senado, nandun lahat ng ebidensya, bababa yung mga senador, titignan nila, tapos aakyat boboto. Hindi tayo, may pomp and may circumstance. Tapos lahat ng kabaduyan ng senador, lumalabas. So yung ganong klaseng showmanship becomes an integral part of the impeachment trial na medyo, I think may only in the Philippines level. And sorry, babalik na naman ako sa 2001. Dati kasi high school ako noon, bro. I couldn't wait to go home. Excited ako umuwi kasi manunood na ako, mag-tune na talaga ako. And you know, Sarah is an interesting, it's also about personalities, di ba? Erap was a very interesting personality to look into. Sarah is a very interesting personality to look into. There's theatrics involved.
Bloodbath nga, bloodbath. Diba?
Oo. Oo. So ano ka kung producer, like, you know, let's pretend na wala tayong political stakes dito. Let's pretend like we're Hollywood producers,
Yeah,
or like,
yeah.
you know, GMA, ABS-CBN producers. The material is gold. The characters are gold.
Content,
Can you
bro.
imagine, like
Yeah.
Laila de Lima and like and Sara Duterte in the same room? Inaalala mo lang, 'di ba, yung si Duterte nasa Congress, nasa House, 'di ba? Tapos nakikipagbangayan siya doon sa mga tao doon. Aliw na yung mga tao. Ito pa kaya, my God.
Absolutely. I mean, my goodness, it would be gold content. Again, from a non-normative standpoint, but from a normative standpoint, what a disaster it would be for a republic if after everything, you cannot even have a trial. Pati nga si Tito Soto, but obviously he has an interest to complain because, you know, there's already discussion about who could be the next Senate president. Tito Soto was saying, parang even the preliminary steps seem to not have been taken by CHIZ Escudera, and I don't know what is his latest excuse. Ang latest excuse niya, my new legislative priorities. And I think this is where I was critical of BBM coming out and saying, ayoko yung trial na. Like, all he had to say was, I'm gonna respect separation of powers and then just zip your mouth and get out of here. But no, he keeps on throwing wet blanket, giving excuses to Tim Piatos, right? Or whoever they're trying to block the trial, di ba? What else can I call them? Tim Piatos, di ba? Like, after everything, you don't want to even have a trial now? But come on, this is ridiculous, di ba? And then, kagabi, I was watching or listening to the debate. Ayan na, naglalabasan na ng Ingles. Yung mga si Tolentino versus... For the first time in my life, na-realize ko, aba, si Coco Pimentel, medyo okay rin pala siya after all, no? Maybe he didn't fall too far from the tree, di ba? He made a very good argument, legally speaking, kasi they were also looking at jurisprudence and gaps in our constitution. The US, they were invoking the example of US quantitatively and qualitatively for how... Kasi yung isang debate ngayon is, what happens if hindi actionan ni CHIZ ngayon and then hintayin niya until next Congress? So argument ni Tolentino, who was like the Ronald Llamas of Digong, and then biglang alyansa, at ngayon biglang bumalik pa or something. His argument was, lapse na yan, dismiss na yan. Pag hindi na-actionan ngayon, hindi na magpapass yan sa next Congress or next Senate. But practically everyone else, including Coco Pimentel, quite eloquently, his argument is that, wait, may continuity yan. And last time I checked, and Dino De Leon also, Attorney Dino, yesterday also clarified, remember, this Senate, bro, doesn't reboot. There were always 12 senators who will be there as incumbent. New 12 will just reboot, di ba? So there's a continuity there. And therefore, walang kwenta yung argument na by then. But anyway, we don't want to get into the granular constitutional debates. What I'm saying is that...
Sorry, ito hindi ako abogado, but isn't the continuity, just the continuity of the fact that this remains the Senate of the same Republic of the Philippines?
Yeah, but they're saying, you know, there's this argument that if the 19th Congress doesn't act upon it, then that means nothing happened for the 20th Senate Congress.
On a parang completely bird's eye view level na parang, ito medyo layman na, just the fact na it's still the Senate of the Philippines, regardless of what the composition is. Dapat may ganong klaseng continuity. In the sense na, you know, the laws of previous Senates are still the laws that we respect until today, until they've been overturned, right? So, there's a continuity in the sense that we're in the same republic, right? Wala namang kudeta, diba? There's a kind of continuity dapat of institutions.
Yeah.
That's kind of my layman response to it. I don't know what the lawyers think.
Well, my reading is that there's so much gaps in the Constitution. We're going to have Justice Carpio also soon, and hopefully all of us will meet together with Justice Carpio also soon, because I'm sure as a man of Constitution, he has also a lot to say on this issue. Now, this is a very interesting case. All I was saying is that dun ko lang narinig si Coco Pimentel na actually explain something, and I realized actually maybe intelligent para siya after all. Like, I know he was a bar top notcher, but I don't get impressed with you just topping the bar. Like, there's more to intelligence. But in fairness, like
Oh, yeah,
kahapon,
yeah, yeah,
parang
yeah.
kahapon, like
Oo.
in fairness, okay pala, not bad, di ba? And then kay Tolentino, di ba, tatlong masters of law neto, parang ganyan lang. Like, they cannot even articulate the basics, but whatever. And then cheese being cheese. Like, saying everything and saying nothing. Galing ni Cheese, no? I mean, he's may pagka Donald Trump siya in the sense that, maybe it happens, maybe not. Anything could happen, maybe both. Like, and then he gets away with it, right? Like, and then you're like confused. So, is he saying or not saying? May pagka
Ano ba
double
talaga
speaks.
ang ibig sabihin ng umiikot? Ito yung hindi dumidiretso. At pag hindi dumidiretso, hindi tayo pupunta dito, papunta doon.
Ayan tayo, like,
Pero bumabalik din naman tayo dito.
Good morning, good morning. We would have loved Ben Tulfo to be there to ask questions. In 20 years of my journalism, I've never seen yung equivocation.
She's talaga, like, even dati na ginagaya ko na parang he's really the master of tautology. Diba? He is Mr. Tautology. He's a really weird political animal. And you wanna, like, actually naisip ko lang, kasi diba, the Escuderos and the Remullas, meron niyang parehong KBL tradition, diba? Meron silang mga ninuno, meron ang tatay nila mga KBL. So akala ng mga tao na ano yan, parang hydra yan, na pag tinawag ng KBL, pag tinawag ng mga Marcos, lalabas yung original loyalties. And I think in the case of the Remullas, that's been proven, di ba, na yung long-standing loyalty nila is there. When it comes to the Escuderos, hindi pala sila KBL hydra. Iba pala ang laro dito. Hindi ko alam kung ano.
Yeah, yun nga eh. Like, ako for me, mas interesting pa yung may mga moments siya na gusto niya maging witty, tapos medyo sablay yung mga jokes niya. Bilisan mo tumakbo. Yung mga like, ano yan? Like cringe, bro. Like, sobrang cringe. May mga moments na sobrang cringe talaga siya. Like, hindi na na-level up yung mga jokes na. These are like 20 years ago jokes. But, whatever. I want to end on this point, bro, kasi alam ko magla-lunch ka na soon. Let me ask, okay, this is a tough question also. Like, okay, with what the genuine opposition, let's just call them genuine opposition na lang, basically non-DDS opposition that won, what should be the next 2 or 3 years, what should the next 2 to 3 years look like? Anong dapat, anong gustong makita, yun na lang, from all the things that went right and wrong in the past or recent memory?
Ako, balik tayo dun sa, lagi kong tinatandaan, 'di ba? Yung 3 runs ni Risa Ontiveros. How did she finally get there? Yung talagang nag-double down on social services issue. Yung 3rd run ni Risa Ontiveros, she became the healthcare candidate. To some extent, you see this also with Bam and Kiko. Bam became the education candidate. Kiko became the agricultural candidate. Notice, hindi yan anti-corruption, hindi yan walang corrupt, walang mahirap, hindi yan sa gobyernong tapat angat buhay lahat. Ang pinapas, social protection. And I think Filipinos love social protection.
Yeah.
Itong konsepto ng ayuda, sa tingin ko Pilipino hindi naman talaga nila gustong bailout. Gusto nila gobyerno na nagre-respond. They want a government that allows them to build up a dignified life for themselves. Right? And education is precisely that. Agricultural support is precisely that. Healthcare is precisely that. It's not the government saying, bibigyan ka namin pera,
Yeah.
Okay, it's the government here, these baseline opportunities so that you can grow as an individual and you can grow as a family. That is what